Thank you. Thank you so much, Fahrettin. Good evening. Let me begin by thanking the SETA Foundation for hosting today's discussion. For 5 consecutive years now, SETA delivered a valuable public service by publishing the European Islamophobia Report. Over the years, the report enabled people around the world to monitor the evolution of anti-Muslim racism in Europe. At the same time, it encapsulated European concerns about certain social and political trends in the continent. In this regard, the European Islamophobia Report is not necessarily about Turkish concerns or Turkish perspective, but the concerns of Europeans themselves, which includes Turkey as a European nation and the Turks as part and parcel of European family. In other words, it's not about pointing fingers, but a call for open and honest dialogue among friends. In this sense, I would like to acknowledge the European Union's financial support to this crucial project and welcome continued cooperation between the Union and the relevant organizations. Of course, needless to say, anti-Muslim racism is not an inherently European problem. Instead, it's a global threat that places at risk human lives everywhere, from Southeast Asia to the United States. Some recent examples immediately come to mind. Every year, thousands of people die or suffer injuries in India, where Hindu extremists, Hindu nationalists systematically displace and intimidate native Muslim communities. In Myanmar, for example, a Nobel Peace Prize winner has been actively involved in acts of genocide targeting Muslims. Finally, in New Zealand, as we all remember, a far-right terrorist, inspired by earlier European gunmen, claimed dozens of victims at a local mosque last year. Nonetheless, Europe can and should be where the war on Islamophobia starts. This is because the continent has a unique history. Generations of Europeans have profited from the Atlantic slave trade. For centuries, European empires colonized distant lands and exploit their resources to enrich themselves. Over the last 100 years, some of the worst atrocities in history, including the Holocaust, took place in Europe. Some of the deadliest ideologies, from fascism to communism, flourished there. It is that capacity for self-improvement that Europeans must tap into today to overcome the challenge of anti-Muslim racism. This is what makes the European Islamophobia Report all the more important. Unfortunately, however, the report shows that the situation is getting worse by the day. News are not good. First of all, there has been a notable increase in the number of attacks against Muslims, Islamic places of worship, and community centers across the continent. Worse still, we have witnessed exponential growth in those numbers over the last 5 years. The frequency of those attacks contribute to their normalization and results in victims being blamed for those crimes. Indeed, the atrocities generated such an atmosphere of fear that only a fraction of Muslims who have been discriminated against report their cases to the authorities. Secondly, international fear to operate with near total impunity in Europe. One of those organizations is Hannibal Network, which has been active in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. That this group has managed to recruit former and current soldiers and police officers speaks to the gravity of the threat to Muslims and European democracies alike. The alarming popularity of Great Replacement and other conspiracy theories not only weaken the fabric of European societies, but also renders them more and more vulnerable to disinformation campaigns, black propaganda, and other hostile information operations. Last but not least, I would like to touch upon the complicity of European media outlets in the rise and normalization of anti-Muslim racism in the continent. Although the mainstream media opposes Islamophobia out of political correctness, it has had no problem glorifying far-left terrorism. Especially in Syria and Iraq, where foreign terrorist fighters, as we all know, have been flocking, the media coverage has almost exclusively been about European Muslims joining terrorist groups, including Daesh and Al-Qaeda. The Western media, however, either ignored or celebrated foreign terrorist fighters joining the ranks of PKK and other far-left terrorist groups. This is definitely bias, and this bias enabled certain groups, including Antifa, to exploit anti-Muslim racism in Europe, to radicalize and lead young people to their deaths. Worse still, individuals who were radicalized and trained by far-left terrorist groups pose a very serious threat to Muslims in Europe, whom they view as part of the so-called invasion. Although some European nations, including United Kingdom, have taken preliminary steps to prosecute foreign terrorist fighters that joined the PKK Syrian affiliate YPG, most individuals continue to enjoy impunity. Keeping in mind that over 5 million Turks live in the continent today, this deliberate act of oversight is a source of grave concern for us, for the government of Turkey. I just would like to underline this. Dear guests, in recent years, the securitization of Islam and European Muslims has been another source of concern. European governments, opinion leaders, and policymakers must stop treating Islam as a security threat and Muslims as potential criminals. Don't do that. Unfortunately, there has been a shortage of leadership in this area. Instead of defending Muslim Europeans and upholding anti-discrimination laws, mainstream political parties, mainstream political actors moved to appropriate anti-Muslim racism and appease extremists. Without further delay, we urge European leaders to right this wrong and correct their course. Another source of concern is related to the coronavirus pandemic. With the world economy expected to shrink by 5.5% this year, it is highly likely that we will witness a spike in violence against, of course, Muslims and Islamic places of worship in Europe. Keeping in mind that the most recent wave of anti-Muslim racism coincided with the Syrian refugee crisis, European governments must take necessary precautions in due time. Failure to act now and stop violent attacks before they occur would definitely cast serious doubt on European Union's commitment to equality and diversity. Ladies and gentlemen, as an advocate of diversity and equality, we took historic steps to combat religious discrimination under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's leadership. In 2000s, the Turkish government facilitated the return of non-Muslim charities previously confiscated properties to their rightful owners. Today, as mosques and Muslim community centers unfortunately come under attack in Europe, we continue to use public resources to restore churches and synagogues. In line with the principle of equal citizenship, we celebrate all religious communities, which we view as part and parcel of Turkish society, of Turkish socio-political reality. From, for example, the Akdamar Church in Van to the Great Synagogue of Edirne, we will continue to preserve our nation's diverse cultural heritage, no doubt. At the same time, the Turkish government is working closely with its friends and allies to combat discrimination, hate speech, and the incitement of violence against Muslims. Last September, the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, together with the leaders of Malaysia and Pakistan, signed off on the establishment of an Istanbul-based English language media and communications center to confront the challenges posed by Islamophobia. Building on the leaders' meeting in New York, we signed a memorandum of understanding in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and we expect Pakistan to get on board shortly. The Directorate of Communications, my institution, remains in talks with our partner institutions to launch this project as soon as possible. The involvement of European governments in similar projects would indeed be a welcome step and send a powerful message of love and solidarity against hate and discrimination. Dear guests, once again, I really would like to extend my gratitude to the SETA Foundation for publishing this timely report and maintaining their commitment to documenting Islamophobia in Europe. Turkey and European Union are close partners, close friends in a broad range of areas, and we can certainly cooperate more closely against anti-Muslim racism. In this regard, the Turkish government is prepared to support efforts by European friends to promote equality for Muslims and other religious communities. I am confident that together we can overcome this very serious challenge and build a safer future for everyone. Thank you.